Terrence Bates here with your Real America's Voice Newsbreak. Thanks so much for being here with us. President Trump continues his trip to Japan with visits with sailors and troops there. His new Japanese counterpart, Mehdi Takeuchi, joined him for at least one of his stops this morning. The commander-in-chief using the photo op to praise Takeuchi.
Going to go down as one of the great prime ministers you watch. Thank you.
Also on 47's agenda today, meeting with business leaders there in Japan. Monday's bilateral meeting between the U.S. and Japanese delegations also marked the first face-to-face meeting between President Trump and the new prime minister. She, by the way, is Japan's first ever woman PM.
I will say that this will be a relationship that will be stronger than ever before, and I look forward to working with you. And on behalf of our country, I want to just let you know, anytime you have any question, any doubt, anything you want, any favors you need, anything I can do to help Japan, we will be there. We are an ally at the strongest level.
The cooperation President Trump alluded to includes the signing of a rare earth minerals deal between the two countries. After leaving Japan, President Trump will head to South Korea for what will arguably be the most watched part of his Asian tour. On Thursday, he's scheduled to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Work is being done behind the scenes in advance of that meeting to broker a trade deal between the United States and China, as President Trump describes the current tariff situation unsustainable for China. China and the United States are the world's two largest economies. At stake in the United States, particularly for the U.S. semiconductor industry, is that so many U.S. firms are hoping that they'll be able to sell artificial intelligence chips to China. American energy companies are also hoping the upcoming Trump-Xi meeting will be seen as an easing of Chinese tariffs on U.S. energy. After China slapped America with the 15% tariff on energy exports, much of the flow of U.S. energy to China was frozen. Well, that's going to do it for your headlines. As always, we appreciate having you along for the ride. Now, let's get you back to the Charlie Kirk Show.
Relentless in spirit. You're listening to The Charlie Kirk Show.
All right, welcome back to The Charlie Kirk Show. We got Alex Marlow from Breitbart, Blake Neff from this show, our secret weapon. And now we are joined by Matt Walsh, the great Matt Walsh from The Matt Walsh Show. Matt, welcome back. Honored to have you. First time back on the show since immediately in the aftermath. And so it's great to see you, my friend. And I had to have you on because I just feel like sometimes we get in these seasons where there's just like these X feuds just break out and they're pretty glorious to watch. And you are more than holding your own right now because you are going after a sacred cow of modernity in the West, and that is Islam. Also food stamps. We could talk about that. We've been talking about it on the show before you got on. But basically, there is a guy, for those who are not aware, named Mehdi Hasan. He's an uppity foreigner who's moved to this country and is now telling us what to do. And now he's going after guys like you, Matt, and basically telling us that, hey, listen, the Muslim call to prayer is the same thing as church bells. And he's more American and more patriotic than Americans are. And we have opinions about that on the show. I know you have opinions about that, Matt. So maybe just let's start right there in this moment. We've got Mamdani on the rise in New York, and Mehdi Hasan's marching alongside him. Now the whole Democratic Party's coming alongside. What diagnose our current moment and this dynamic that is playing out right before our eyes?
Yeah, well, I think Mehdi Hasan came onto my radar a couple of weeks ago because he was defending the idea that we should have a Muslim call to prayer, and he said it's no different than church bells. Of course, a Muslim call to prayer, for one thing, plays at 5 in the morning. I've never heard a church bell go off at 5 in the morning. But more importantly, a church bell is it's Christian. It's a Christian church that is playing. It's part of living in America because we are a Christian country. A Muslim call to prayer is not part of American culture. We are not a Muslim country. You can go to dozens of other countries on the planet to hear the Muslim call to prayer whenever you want to hear it. But that's not the case in our country. And the call to prayer is a public thing. It's like you are announcing this to the public, and that's not our culture. We're not a Muslim country. And so that's the point I wanted to make to him. Even though we should also be clear about Mehdi Hasan in particular, that this is obviously on his own is a very inconsequential person. He was, he got fired from his MSNBC gig, where I think I looked it up in his key demo. He was getting like 37,000 views an episode or something, so he got fired. No one's really paid attention to him. But the reason why it matters is because this is just one guy, but he's representative of a problem. And the problem are, immigrants who come to this country and believe that we are, as Americans, it is our job to assimilate to them rather than them assimilate to us. And this is one thing that I think people have gotten wrong. I've gotten wrong because I've said in the past that, well, the problem is we have immigrants who come here and they don't assimilate. They don't, we've gotten rid of assimilation. The whole melting pot thing was a misnomer. It didn't happen. Well, that's not exactly correct, because what's actually happened is you get these immigrants like Mehdi Hasan, like Zohran Mamdani, who come here and they do believe in assimilation, but they think assimilation should go the other way. We should assimilate to them. And in fact, Mehdi even said that, I think his word, he said, well, I'm just as American as anyone else. Okay, you're a Muslim, you're an Indian Muslim who came here from the UK 10 years ago to work at Al Jazeera. And you're just as American as anyone else. You're just as American as an American whose family's been here for 200 years. Really, you're just as American as them. Does anyone believe that? No, nobody believes that. It's total nonsense. And I think we're reaching a point now in our culture where people are standing up and saying that, because Americans are sick and tired of this.
Well, absolutely. And by the way, Mehdi Hasan has now come after Charlie, who's not with us to defend himself anymore. Go ahead and throw out 158 here. So this is Mehdi Hasan basically quote tweeting DC Drano, who was showing an image of Charlie, who was saying that it's not Islamophobic to notice that Muslims are coming into our country and demanding that we live according to their rules, and now they are going to rule over us. Because you even see this in the mayoral race in New York City, where Cuomo is now being castigated for not visiting a Muslim mosque. And so Mehdi Hasan says, a reminder of what a racist bigot Kirk was and how much hate he incited against minorities. So now he's playing victim. See, this is like the rule book, right? They come in, they take advantage of our generosity and our open society, and then they start playing victim because we start noticing that they're doing things that we don't like, and we call it out. Matt, what is your reaction to Mehdi Hasan calling Charlie Kirk a racist bigot?
Well, I mean, it's pretty rich coming from someone who is himself legitimately a racist bigot. He's on the record many times. He hates white people. He hates Christians. He's just seething with hatred, and that's the only thing he brought to this country. That is what he has offered to us as an immigrant. He's come here to bring us hatred, and hatred specifically for the people who actually built this country. Because that's the other thing we should be clear about. Another thing that Mehdi has said is that well, Muslims helped to build this country. Muslims built this country the same way that anyone else did, and that is just not true. Islam had nothing to do with this country. Muslims contributed basically nothing to it whatsoever. They were here in very, very small numbers up until actually after 9/11. People don't realize this, but the Muslim population in this country exploded and became substantial over the last 20 years. Prior to 9/11, there was 500,000 to maybe 1 million Muslims. Now there's 4 or 5 million. So this is how the country responded. This is how our government responded after 9/11. Not only was there not any campaign of persecution of Muslims after 9/11, despite what Zohran Mamdani has claimed, not only did that not happen, but the exact opposite happened, that the government bent over backwards to apologize to Muslims. I mean, George W. Bush, 6 days after 9/11, the rubble is still burning. He's out in front of he's standing up there declaring that Islam is a religion of peace. And then we turned around and started importing Muslims en masse into this country. And what really gets me about it is, among other things, is just the lack of humility and gratitude. When Zohran Mamdani gets up there and starts complaining, talking about how his aunt, who apparently doesn't actually exist, was the real victim of 9/11. She felt uncomfortable wearing a hijab on the train. Nothing happened to her. She just felt uncomfortable wearing it. And he's in tears. 25 years later, he's in tears about it still. He can barely even talk about it. But number one, that's a bogus story. But number two, where is your your gratitude. You know, Muslims have been treated better in this country than white American Christians ever would be in a Muslim country. In fact, Muslims have been treated better in this country than they would be treated in most Muslim countries. And rather than ever getting a thank you, rather than an acknowledgement of that, all we get is this just constant accusations and blaming and complaining. And like I said, I think Americans are.
I think that's actually the real thing. Is it's not even just that they're not grateful. I think it really is. It actually is a culture of genuine resentment. Like, it is resentment for how much better America is, how much better Christian society has been than any Muslim country in history. It's not a coincidence that Mehdi Hasan's family chose to settle in the UK rather than any Muslim country. It's not a coincidence that when he decided to leave the UK, he went to another Western, historically Christian country rather than any Muslim country. Well, that's not a coincidence. And then especially it really is like this culture of resentment that Mamdani can come to this country, which let in a ton of people like him after 9/11, and then his platform is guilt tripping you because his abuela or whatever relation he decides to call her,
auntie, because with brown people, all
felt
cousins are
uncomfortable,
aunties.
and also just like his plan, which I think has not been highlighted nearly as much as it should. His explicit policy plan is he wants to up taxes on white neighborhoods. Like, he'll just put that in his thing. Whiter neighborhoods should pay more money so I can funnel to people like me who are aggrieved at America for the sin of letting us in.
But it is pretty amazing that they tried to create this new standard that Christians and Jews who have been mayor of New York, running for mayor of New York, that they don't go to enough mosques. Like, that would be a standard for being a good mayor. It's not that you're free to practice Islam in New York City. It's that you have to be a great mayor, you have to go to mosque all the time. They just tried to pull that over on us, and Matt caught it, which is great.
If I ever go to a mosque for any reason other than as a tourist.
So I won't do that, but point made. Matt, so you are highlighting something, though, that this is really a failure of our elites in our immigration policy. You tweeted here, 167, 1 in 5 New Yorkers can't speak the English language. 40% were not born in this country. New York is not an American city anymore. I think this is what we need to really fix our eyes on, that this is ultimately a failure of our immigration policies. We should not, as millennials, I think everybody's basically a millennial on this panel right now, we should not be forced to be even having this debate. This is a world that we inherited because our elites failed to protect our country against people that don't like us and are allowed to move here. Matt Walsh.
Yeah, people who don't like us and in many cases have not come to contribute anything, but have come instead to live off of the labor of actual Americans, to live off of the fruits of trees that they didn't plant. And that's one of the key differences between immigrants today. Not all of them, but one of the key differences between immigration in general today as opposed to 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Because one thing about that, I pointed out that 40% weren't born in this country, 20% don't speak English. There were a bunch of responses, of course, from leftists saying, well, I got you this time because, did you know 100 years ago there were even more people as a percentage who didn't speak English? That's the claim. And even if let's just pretend that that's true. Let's just say for the sake of argument that's true. Well, that is, again, the left failing to understand, or pretending at least they don't understand, the key difference, the difference in kind between immigration today and immigration back in the earlier years of this country. Okay, because back 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people were coming to this country. First of all, this was not an influx of third worlders coming into this country. That's difference number one. Difference number two is related to that. These were people 100 years ago, 150, 200 years ago, who were coming here to actually help build the country. We were still coming in on the ground floor to help build this country. These were like a pioneer spirit, settlers, right, who were coming. And that's not the case anymore because this country is settled, it's built. And so now you have immigrants coming from the third world who, rather than coming to build anything, are coming to live in what has already been built, coming to take advantage of what has already been done, coming to be fed by us. And that is obviously a huge difference that I think any thinking person can see.
And fundamentally transform it. It's not just, this is the whole point, they're accelerating. We all reject diversity as our strength, okay? But think of it from the negative. conserving what we have is our weakness. That's their view, is that we conserve what America's all about, our traditional values, Judeo-Christian values. That's a weakness. That's how they see it. That's very clear now.
Yeah, well, listen, we've got a lot more to talk about with Matt Walsh, host of the Matt Walsh Show. Great American. We got to come up. Is it Heritage American? Where are we going to land on that whole debate? More with Matt Walsh. We're going to blow the brakes. Keep going. We'll be back in about 3 seconds. All right, welcome back. Really quick, so I'm going to play a clip from Charlie talking about Islam, because this is the Charlie Kirk Show. It bears his name. We will forever remember his legacy and remember his work. But it just strikes me, guys, that this is a problem that we should not have to deal with. This is such a failure of the open borders regime, of the end of civilization, thinking that we'd conquered the future. And there's just a hubris that that some in a generation before us have exercised, and that we now have to face down a completely hostile invading force, an invading religion and ideology that Charlie, hit the nail on the head once again. Let's go ahead and play cut 186. This is Charlie on how Islam is impacting the country. 186.
Look at Europe. The Islamist invasion brought to you by the secular humanist European technocratic elites is making Europe worse. It's making Europe dirtier. It's making Europe less safe. It has no cultural identity. It's decaying and collapsing as a nation. There's no European identity left whatsoever. And the worst part of it is that it's invited. Islamism has a tendency to take over and metastasize like a cancer. Immigration without assimilation is invasion, and Islam does not assimilate. Islam conquers. Islam takes over. Islam devours. Islam is an imperialistic, parasitic ideology. Islam views itself as a conquering faith. You have to pray 5 times a day, pointing towards a separate nation, pledging fealty to another nation. Islam's own self-story is that we will take you over. It's totalitarianism masked as a religion.
It's one of my favorite riffs from
That was
Charlie.
hot.
Matt Walsh, we have about 2 minutes before Welcome Back National Radio here. Your reaction to what we just heard from Charlie.
Well, as usual, you hit the nail on the head, and we need to start speaking about it in those kinds of strong terms, because that's the thing. I used to myself, I've admitted this before, that when I would hear conservatives worry about things like Sharia law coming to the United States, I used to think, well, I'm not as worried about that because we have leftism. Like, leftists are the opposite of Sharia law. But it turns out that concern is completely legitimate because, of course, obviously it's going to come, as Charlie pointed out, through mass migration, and these are people who they're just not interested in assimilation, which is another key difference between immigration today and immigration 100 years ago, 150 years ago. There's no interest in assimilating into an American identity. In fact, these are people that reject that America even has an identity, and to the extent that they acknowledge an American identity, they hate it. And so what do you end up with when you bring people like that into this country? You end up with, chaos. Here's the question you have to ask yourself as an American. Does anyone want to live in a country that is more like the Middle East? Do you consider it an improvement? The more we resemble the Middle East, is that an improvement? And I think every single American, every single one would say no.
Apparently, a lot of Muslims feel that way because they don't move to those countries.
Yeah, there are 50-plus Muslim majority nations on the planet. 50-plus. And for whatever reason, they want to move to the Western nations. I think we could speculate. I don't think it's actually very speculative why they want to choose Western nations. Obviously, it's the quality of life.
Actually, let's fix it on that, because it actually is not speculation. We have, when they were building one of those Islamic centers in, I think it was the one in Michigan, where they were gloating about the fact, we can build roads and have them named after great Islamic conquerors. They are quite aware that they are in a rising demographic tide. They brag about the fact that they are growing and growing and growing and gradually taking over these countries. They do this publicly. We don't need to beat around the bush for it.
I got an email. Well, actually, 10 seconds till Radio Rejoin. We'll be right back. I'm going to read one quick email from a Muslim listener. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. We got Matt Walsh here with us. So this is an email, Matt, and maybe you can respond to it. This is from David. He says, as a Muslim, the call to prayer should be programmed on their cell phones. Remember, they receive free cell phones from Obama. Once it's time for call to prayer, it goes to their cell phones. This is America. Every religion is welcome. And he says, P.S., why are so many Arabs in America? Who destroyed all the countries in the Middle East? So this is...
I don't think David Barry is a Muslim.
Well, we don't...
Sorry, David.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of people named that.
Yeah. So the point is, that is an argument that you will hear often, right? You will hear that we invaded... And so now we have to invite. We invaded and ruined their countries. We bombed Iraq or whatever. So now this is just the reaction to the action. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's like it's a kind of a reparations argument. That's the argument they're making. You know, to me, you're surrendering the argument. If you the argument the only argument that could possibly be compelling to me for why we should accept mass migration from any part of the world is if you can say, well, no, we should do this because this is going to help America. It's going to make life better for Americans, people who live here. It's actually going to improve America. And so that's why we should do it. And if you're not even making that argument, if instead you're doing some reparations nonsense about we owe it to them because we invaded, well, it's like that's you're not getting past step one on that one. It's not even an argument because, by the way, I'm very much opposed to wars of intervention. I'm against all of that, and I wish we hadn't done pretty much any of it. But by the way, no, we didn't do that. I didn't do that. My children didn't do that. My neighbors down the street didn't do that. You know, if you live in a town in Michigan where that now has become Little Mecca, and you got the call to prayer and streets being named after Muslims, you didn't do any of that. So what is this we stuff? So we have to now pay the price. We have to give up our national identity and our national sovereignty to pay for the sins of George Bush. And meanwhile, George Bush is fine. You know, he's living in a place where there's, there are no third world immigrants. He doesn't have to worry about that. So no, we didn't do that. And that's not something that we have to pay for. And again, that's not the kind of argument that you should be making. The only compelling argument you could possibly make is to somehow indicate to us how this helps America, and you can't.
Matt, where do you think in the timeline liberals started to be comfortable with totalitarians just so long as they came from the third world? Because it seemed like the liberals were the ones who were going to guard us in terms of freedom, the ability to have women do whatever they want, even if it's not good for them, all that stuff. And then now we're here, and it just feels like we got there pretty fast.
Yeah, well, we know that the left, I think as everyone knows, the left has been totalitarian this entire time. They don't, they believe that we have the right to do whatever they say. We have the right to live according to how they want. We have the right to adopt beliefs that they believe. And so those are the only rights that they actually recognize. Now, it is true. So they always have had that totalitarian streak, and maybe that's the answer. Now, it is true, of course, that they're importing these third worlders who are a very different kind of totalitarian and who want to impose a lifestyle that in many cases completely contradicts the lifestyle the left wants to foist on us. And so it's very strange bedfellows. But I think ultimately the leftists, what do they hate the most? They hate white people. They hate Christians. They hate Christendom. And so, the enemies of my enemies, that's the way they look at it.
Yeah,
Matt. Well, what's you're world's foremost expert on the trans contagion. What's the trans population like in some of these Arab countries that we're talking about?
I would guess it's about 1.3. I think maybe one person and a third of another one. Not many, and famously, the whole LGBT alphabet soup. They don't fare too well in these countries. I'm told.
We got an email from Michael, and he says, gentlemen, Islamophobia is a composite term based on the Greek word phobia, meaning irrational fear of something that has no cause. There are significant problems with this terminology, and I agree. It's not irrational to fear someone who said they will kill you for your faith. I have to say it's a really good point. Matt, final 30 seconds here. Is Islamophobia a real thing?
No, it's not real for the reason you just said. There's nothing irrational. And by the way, it's not for me. It's not even fear either. This is not about being afraid. At least not afraid for myself. I'm afraid for my country. I'm afraid for my children. But there's nothing irrational about it. We're just looking at what these people believe and what they do, and we're drawing logical conclusions.
The crime of noticing, according to the liberal, is the crime of being a racist bigot. Racist, as Charlie used to always say. Matt Walsh, host of the Matt Walsh Show, great American. Appreciate you making the time for us today, my friend.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care. Alex Marlow, it's also been a pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
Been really nice. Nice to see you gentlemen in person.
We'll see you tomorrow here at the Charlie Kirk Show.
God bless Charlie Kirk.